Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ian Mann, and I'm joined on the panel today with Mr. Clay Purvis and Ms. Valerie Warehood. The Assessment Department personnel is Matthew Barocas. The administrative personnel today is Twinkle Sharma. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all of the applications have been heard, and the board will then deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 7 on our docket today. Ms. Sharma, would you please affirm both the assessors and the applicant's testimony?
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Applicant, please state your full name.
Farah Cates.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Barocas, then I would ask you to turn to number 1 on the docket. That's the street address of 390 Academy. If you can introduce the property, please, and provide your evidence.
All right. Thank you very much. File 24-2697, roll number 1205-0059-000 390 Academy Road. It's a residence, apartment, multi-use with commercial. So combined assessed value $9,466,000. The commercial is valued at $3,866,000. The apartment is $5,600,000. So 2 buildings, 2 to 3 stories. So this one building, the 3-story was constructed in 1931, and the 2-story building was constructed in 1986. There is an effective age of 1995 on the property. That'd be the residential portion. You'll see via the pictures and the permits that they've done a full conversion to it. So 23 suites, no parking, construction class C masonry bearing walls. Onto page 2 shows that they've been always compliant and handing in their mailers, and there's no recent sales. Page 3 shows the overall income summary. 23 units, 31 bedroom, 22 bedroom. Average monthly rent $1,814 per unit. So on the commercial, we've got office and retail. And the office is capped at 5.7 as per the model, with Net operating income of 105,168 gets you to 1,845,000. And then the retail is capped at 7 with a net operating income of 141,435 to get you to 2,021,000. Just glancing ahead, we're not too far off on this income stream, so I won't belabor it. And then the apartment is where there's a bigger difference. We got gross potential rent of 500,000, and then 41.54 expense ratio capped at 5.05 is how we get to the 5.6 million, 243 478 per unit. We have our subject market income for the premises on page 4, both apartment and commercial. The commercial is in the $20 range, and you can see the apartment rent per suite there as well, as previously mentioned. Rent comparables are on page 5. So they range from 1,951, 2,384. These are older buildings that have been renovated, fixed up. You can see by the effective year built, that's what I was going for in that regard. We're not too far off on the rents, so I won't belabor that point. Comparable leases are found here on page 6. So what I was looking for with these ones, sorry, just backtracking here. So I was looking at the square footages. The square footages range between 478 up to 1,350. And that encompasses the premise sizes that we have as well. The retail areas are larger. Doesn't look like I was able to find premises of that size in the area in our system. Page 7, capitalization rate evidence. This is the chart you've all seen before. These are, let's do this once. They're just sales that took place during the reference period. They're not site specific, but they're just meant to substantiate model derived cap rates. I took the 3-year net operating income, a stabilized net operating income, and applied it to an arm's length sale that wasn't purchased for renovation. So those sales were not included. The range is from 346 all the way up to 5 3/4. Then we got our cap rate chart here on page 8. 9 is the Miniac excerpts, and then on to page 10, this permit summary. The main permit of interest here is the big one in the big white rectangle in the middle of the chart, number 19159399MU. Interior and exterior alterations, landlord work permit to convert the existing vacant commercial building into a fully sprinklered multi-use building. They constructed a new second floor. Portion of the main second floor to be converted into commercial rental units. Portion of the main second floor's entire third floor to be residential. Demolition of all interior partitions and existing electrical and mechanical components. Modification of some exterior finishes. Installation of a new curtain wall and elevators as well. So the work was quite extensive, valued at $7.1 million. So they did a heck of a lot to turn it from what it was before, vacant commercial building, into what it is now. So it's on Academy Road, and you see, starting on page 12, there's some photographs of it. Then just scrolling through the photos of the commercial space begin on page 15. So looks like it's all finished up in there. And then on page 19, you can see the quality of the residential component. So, I mean, they look pretty brand new. This would be what I consider equivalent to like modern finishings. Except you're on Academy, you're not in like a field in a suburb or something like that. Then beginning on page 24, you can see this would be in the basement. Looks like they've got some new concrete footings, and you can see all the mechanical, electrical, HVAC. It, as per the permit and as substantiated by the photographs, is all new. So it's like a new building. I believe this was Uptown Alleys. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I was there a long time ago. Kind of looks familiar. And then we have the mailer on page 27. So when I was looking at this mailer, what really jumped out to me was the repairs and maintenance were extremely high. 121 for 2022, that's on page 27, 153 for 2021. And when we're looking at 23 units, that is many magnitudes higher than what we typically see. I mean, this place is fully renovated. Where are they spending that money in 2022? I'm not sure, so I didn't consider the actuals in that regard because they just didn't make sense. So we went fully with the model. You've got the rent roll on page 28. And then you've also got the commercial rent roll as well in 20 and 29. So overall, it's like a completely new place in an older shell off Academy. 243 a unit. Looking at the pictures, it looks like it's brand new. Up to modern taste on the inside. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, questions for Mr. Brooks?
Yes, thank you. So for your income value summary on page 3, would the model be considering the effective age rather than the actual age of the property?
Yes.
And then on page 5, where you have your rent comps, just looking at the subject column where it shows the gross floor area per unit, given that the units aren't actually close to 2,100, this would be including the commercial area and other common area of the property.
Yes, that's true. I almost wish this column wasn't included because when you're looking at a resam, especially, that figure gets inflated and can be a cause of confusion. So, but yeah, you're 100% right and good on pointing that out.
Would you say that that could be increasing the model's rents assigned to the apartment?
Yeah, it could be. But when I'm looking at the mailer here, they're reporting 466 on the residential rent, and then you add 16 back to that, and now you're up to 482. So we're at 500. That's not, well, actually, our effective is 483, and they're reporting 482 after vacancy. So it looks like, well, the model may well have blown it up a bit because of that effective average monthly rent. We do a review, and it looks like on an effective income collected basis, we're pretty bang on.
Okay. Going to your cap rate table on page 8, For the commercial OFS, that cap rate's at 5.7. So just looking at the city's 20th to 80th percentile of the suburban OFS, 5.7 would probably be on the low end of your cap rate ranges. Would you agree?
5.7 suburban. Well, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, the 20th to 80th is 5.25, is 6 3/4, so it's around the middle, maybe a little bit on the lower end of the 80th to 20th percentile.
Okay. And the city's cap rates are further supported by the broker cap rates, and the brokers for the OFS wouldn't suggest anything lower than 6. Would you agree with that?
According to that chart, yes, I would agree with that.
And then in terms of your cap rate sales, just jumping back to page 7, do you provide the workups or just the final values?
Just the final values. I do have the workups, but I've been told that I can't put them in. But yeah, just all I have is the final values.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my questions on this property, and then I also have some brief rebuttal to present when we get there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Purvis, have you any questions?
I have a bit of a question just regarding the calculation of an effective date of the build. This one we're looking at, so I want to scroll back up. I don't want to say the wrong number. We're saying the effective date is 1995.
Yes, that's what we have.
It's just when it's a full sort of interior renovation like this, is there a reason why it's not an effective date more recent than that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we are looking at setting effective dates, what happens with these full-scale renovations is that like there's life being added to the property, and how do we go and quantify that? Well, what we do is we'll take a look at the income and expenses that are submitted to us following the renovation, and then we'll make adjustments to the effective age that bring reflect what's submitted to us, bring that in line with the model. Because after a renovation, the expenses are going to go down, and it's going to command more income. So it's a mechanism for trying to capture the effect of it more than anything.
Okay. I think that's my only question at this time. Maybe one of the other panelists will ask something that prompts another one, but I'm going to let them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warren, questions?
No, that was my question and it was answered. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Brokus. First of all, with respect to the capitalization rate evidence that you have on page 7, these are all apartment multi-family buildings. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Are they mixed use with respect to, like, is there commercial aspects to any of these properties?
I don't believe so. So this cap rate is in the last column would only pertain to the apartment income stream
Okay.
of this file.
Now, generally speaking, and I haven't seen this come up before with respect to cap rates, but are cap rates affected? See, would residential cap rates be affected by the inclusion in a building of retail or office space? Like, would the cap rates be higher or lower, or is there any effect at all in that inclusion? And I'm not talking about a blended rate here. I'm talking about, is the capitalization rate, is it more attractive to investors or less attractive to investors using that hypothetical, or is that something you can address?
I mean, it would be kind of hard to quantify, like if we were to isolate them. I mean, if you're living downtown in one of these like 300 Main or True North Square, and you've got a grocery store down there, and you've got restaurants, that could be something that's attractive, that might have an effect on a cap rate, a residential cap rate, if an analysis was done splitting it apart. But there isn't really a way to kind of quantify that. It would be more on a case by case basis, and like the nature of the actual commercial that's there in the neighborhood and what that commercial attracts. So I know that was kind of a roundabout talk there, but I haven't seen any discernible way of saying it would have a positive or negative effect one way or the other.
Fair enough. The last question I have relates to a comment you made with respect to the mailer or the income and expense mailer at page 27. You said that the repairs and maintenance at for 2021 and 2022 were very high.
Yeah.
The quick math, it's just under $6,000 a suite.
Yeah.
And these are all freshly brand new renovated suites?
Well, it was done in 2014,
Okay.
but still, and also another thing I didn't mention that, like, these expenses, like, these are combined with the commercial expenses as well. So with no ability to like separate them out, what's attributed to the respective commercial premises and what the respective tenants, what portion of those unknown commercial expenses might be paid for by the tenants. Just went with the model on this one because there's not enough financial detail. That, and along with the repair and maintenance being over $5,000 a unit.
Okay. And the last question I have on that is that you just mentioned that as well, combined. It indicates at the bottom of page 27 in hand writing, looks like ink, for 390 and 400 Academy Road combined. But there's separate roll numbers. The 390 Academy is the property subject today. 400 Academy is a separate roll number. That's not part of the commercial calculations that you've done here.
No, I did not.
No, that's fine. I was just wanted to make sure that we were just dealing with the one property.
Yeah, I think if you let me type that in, I suspect one might be a parking lot on a separate roll. But I mean, the applicant might have more to say about that.
Okay, fair enough. That's fine. I don't have anything else. Ms. Cates, what we'll do is we'll hear your presentation and then we'll have the questions on that and we'll deal with your rebuttal. I don't think it's been submitted to all of the panel members. We have to distribute it?
Yeah, distributed them. It's there in your folders now. You can refresh it and you'll see it.
Okay, then what we'll do is we'll hear your presentation first and then we'll make sure we've all got the rebuttal and you can deal with that. Okay, fair enough. Ms. Cates, you're up.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2 of my brief, I have some of the facts of the property as well as our requested assessments. So we're requesting $4,650,000 on the residential portion and $3,651,000 on the commercial portion. If you go to page 6, we have our property site maps. So we have an aerial map view and then a Google map view of the neighborhood. And then some exterior photos on page 7 and 8. Property description on page 9. So the subject is on the south side of Academy at its intersection with Ash in the North River Heights area. The property is a 3-story building constructed in 1931 and a 2-story building constructed in 1986. And we note the effective age of 1995 assigned, and the commercial building has no additional effective age assigned. The property has 23 residential units, including 3 1-bedrooms and 22 bedrooms. And there's no parking available on the site. And then there is commercial space with a leasable area of 13,613 square feet. On page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. So we are applying potential market rents of $477,904 or $17.32 per unit per month based on the actual income reported for the property. We are applying a market vacancy of 3.4%. And we are applying expenses of $217,534 or 47.1% based on an allocation of the 21 and 22 expenses. On page 15, we have the overview of our cap rate. So we are applying a cap rate of 5.25% based on our cap rate study. Given the effective age, that would put it at a base cap rate of 5.25%. And we're not making any additional adjustments, but given that the shell of the building is from the 30s, we believe it should be at least 5.25 rather than a 5% cap rate, which would be more comparative to something completely brand new. On page 17, we have our income and expense breakdown. So we typically would stabilize based on 3 years of income and expense data, but just given the completion of the renovations of the property, we only had 2 years to look at. So given that it's the same owner with 390 Academy and 400 Academy, the statements, and they're kind of operated together, the statements are combined. So 400 Academy would just be some additional commercial space. You could see it too on the income and expense mailers. They circle the ones that belong to the different role at 400. So what we've done, so they do report their residential rents separately. So that is exclusive to this property. So we have an effective gross income of $461,655. Parking is accounted for as part of the different roles. So I'm not adding it into the analysis here because it's not actually on this site, but there is some parking available to some of the tenants of the property. In terms of expenses, what we've done is we've taken a look at the expenses they've reported, but we've done a couple of adjustments. So the first one you'll notice would be to repair and maintenance. The repair and maintenance, as the assessor pointed out, was quite high. What I've done is I've capped it at a value of $2,000 a suite. The reason being based on a bunch of different apartments that we've had the opportunity to review in the city, repair and maintenance for well-maintained properties could typically be in the range of $1,800 to $2,200 a suite. So $2,000 a suite would be reasonable, but on the higher end of that range to reflect the investment in the property. And then the second adjustment we've done is you'll notice we've deducted the commercial expenses, line item 29. Since the statements are combined, there's not an exact method for removing the commercial expenses, but this would appear to be a pretty accurate approach in terms of trying to parse out what's purely for the residential. So we have total expenses of $217,534, a net operating income of $244,121, and with a 5.25% cap rate gives an indicated value of $4,650,000 rounded. Now, in regard to our cap rates, I have submitted an independent apartment cap rate study. I know everyone's heard it before, so I won't belabor the point, but essentially what we've done is we've taken a look at market information of what the brokers are saying for cap rates. We've also reviewed the assessor's cap rate ranges. And then what we've done is we've gone and calculated our own cap rates based on sale data that we had available. And then we also may consider adjustments to the cap rates for different factors if it's required. So we haven't done so for this property, but for some of the properties to follow later on, we have considered some adjustments. So that's all there for your review. And then I'll just move to the commercial valuation that we've done in our main brief. So on page 18, we've taken a look at the OFS stream. So we note that there are leases in the property at a range of $20 to $22 a square foot. We've applied the midpoint of that range, $21 a square foot, to the vacant units. As well, we've applied market allowances for vacancy, 6%, shortfall, $8 a square foot, non-recoverables at 3%. And then on page 19 of the brief, just have an overview of our office cap rates. So we are disputing the cap rate in place of 5.7%. we will apply a cap rate of 6.5% to better reflect this property. So when you're looking at our office suburban categories, for office suburban A, it would be a range of 6.25% to 6.75%. So we have applied a range of 6.5%. And I would note the retail at this same property has been allocated a cap rate of 7%. So we're kind of in that similar range here. So on page 21, we have our workup of the commercial. So that gives our indicated value of $1,630,000 rounded. And then we did a review of the retail stream, same idea with the rents and cap rate, and we believe that the value in place of $2,021,000 is reasonable. So we're not disputing that figure. So that gives a total value for the commercial of $3,651,000. Our appendix starts on page 25, and I've included the financials that we've looked at for the property. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gates. Mr. Brokus, questions?
Yes, so on page, let me see here. On page, actually, let's go to the mailer first. The mailer is found on 28, if we could go there. Please. So, and I didn't notice this before, so you can confirm that the income and expenses in this chart and the numbers used in your workup, they're actually two buildings on two separate roll numbers combined. Is that correct?
Yes, two separate roll numbers. Yeah, because 400 Academy would be, a couple different commercial units.
Okay. And okay, so I guess, oh, sorry, the mailer, I guess the 2 years used are on page 30. So when we go back to your workup, and I'm just looking at figures here. So you use expenses from the building next door in your workup as it pertains to 390 Academy, is that correct?
It wouldn't have been an intentional choice to use expenses from a different, this is how they format their expenses. So yes, they are combined, but I believe that the deduction that we've made for the commercial recoveries would then account for that combined statement.
Okay. So just like checking it out here, like the insurance figure of 25,572 on page 17 that you attributed all to the residential on 390 Academy, isn't that the insurance amount that it would be to insure both buildings, including commercial?
I would imagine so. That's why we did our best to deduct the expenses as best we could. But yes, the expenses would be presumably combined based on the formatting.
And then the same would go for like the hydro and water. The other building would be involved. Other commercial premises would be involved as well. And then a deduction was made. Is that how it was done?
Yes, essentially, we weren't able to parse out for the individual properties, so we've made a deduction of $155,000 rounded from the residential expenses to essentially try to parse out what could be attributed purely to the residential property.
And then just how did you come up with the $155,000?
I believe that must have been provided on statements or independently by the owner.
Okay.
Oh, that's on the statements. So if we're on page, if you go to page 30, they list common area property tax recoveries. So that's the figure that was used.
Okay. And I know on page 17, you brought the income and expenses down to 2,000 a unit. But before that, it was really high. Do you know the nature of what they were spending the rest of the money on?
I don't, we just had the totals, which is why I didn't include our R&M breakdown, which we usually have, which parses it out. I agree that those figures were high. So I think 2,000 a suite is more appropriate.
All right. And those are my questions for now. I also have a cap rate rebuttal that I could go through. I would just verbally talk about, but those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for process. What we'll do is after we've had the questions on Ms. Cates's presentation, we'll deal with her rebuttal, go through the questions, then deal with your rebuttal, Mr. Brokus. And I'm sure that a lot of those will apply to every property, so we'll go through it once. We'll reference it, of course, for every property, but we'll just carry it through if that's acceptable to all parties.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Warren. Questions?
None at this time, thank you.
Mr. Purvis.
I just had one that's kind of, I noticed in the city's brief, the A&T brief, it says there's no parking, but then both of them, the different expense reports and statements all sort of indicate there's an expense or like there's line items for parking. So is there, or isn't there parking with this building?
So there's no parking on the site of this property, but since they also have 400 Academy, there is some parking that then is allocated to some of the residential units here. But in terms of, since those are separate parcels, there's no parking on this site. So if they didn't own the other site, then there would be no parking at all. So we note that there would be some parking here, but it would be allocated to the other role. So we've not then allocated again to this property.
And is there an appeal? Is there an appeal being done on the assessment of 400 Academy?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check our records. Oh, apparently not.
Okay. All right. I'm just, because I know there's a policy or procedure that we're supposed to deal with them all at the same time, but it sounds like it's just this one part of the property. That's my questions for right now. I'll wait until the rebuttal if I have any more.
Generally speaking, Ms. Cates, with respect to the cap rate studies that you filed as part of the brief, the cap rate studies are the cap rates that Altus has used in their studies are those that Altus had direct access to. So did for the stabilization of expenses and income?
Yes, a combination of publicly available information we might have had on file. Yes.
Okay. And I asked this question from every applicant, the comparison between the city, which uses a 20% and an 80%, and Altus, for example, which has a direct range with no outlying areas for the under the 20% or over the 80%. Can you explain why the range is so discrete with respect to the Altus cap rate study, whereas there seems to be a little bit more bell curve like drawing in the cities with the 20% and 80% holding the bulk of those numbers?
So in terms of the 20th to 80th percent that the city would have, that would be based on their modeling. Since we're doing our own cap rate calculations, we don't have that same modeling to kind of do that 20th to 80th percent. And in terms of the way we categorize cap rates into age brackets, yes, then what you're going to have is some that are closer to the end of the border. So for example, if you had a property in 1969 and a property in 1970, potentially those could have two separate cap rates. Typically, we try to smooth those out. My understanding of the city's modeling is that they used to have more discrete categories, but then in more recent years, they've tried to level those off. So then there'll be slight differences. hope that answers. If not, maybe you could clarify.
No, I think that answers the question that I had. Thank you. I don't have anything else. And you indicated that you had some rebuttal evidence.
Yes.
And has that been distributed?
Yeah, the rebuttal has been shared on SharePoint and your folder. You can refresh. It says applicant rebuttal.
Okay, I've got that applicant rebuttal, Altus rebuttal to city cap. Is that the
Yeah.
Does Mr. Purvis, Ms. Warren, Mr. Brokus, have you got this?
Yes,
Yep.
Hey, Ms. Cates, would you please present your rebuttal evidence?
Okay, thank you. So I'll just present it briefly. If you go to page 4, at the top, we have some discussion on some of the low end cap rates in the city's evidence, 3.46 on Sargent, 4.21% on Young. We believe that these should be looked at with quite a bit of skepticism. We don't have the workups to show how they were arrived at, and typically cap rates that are that low point to the idea that the purchaser might have been purchasing a different income opportunity, because we don't typically see cap rates below 4.5, 4.75 in the Winnipeg apartment market. And then in terms of the rest of the rebuttal, what we've done is we've taken a look at the city's cap rates where we had access to the information, and we've restabilized them based on how we would approach them. So when we're looking at cap rates, a big part of cap rate calculation would be principle of anticipation and what the purchaser may expect to get in terms of the income stream that they'd be purchasing. So when a different income stream, which may be pointing to higher rents, is advertised to them through broker information or wherever else, then that would probably be part of their assumptions that they would make in calculating their cap rates. So we've done that across a couple of different properties. So 459 Sargent, we've restabilized at a 5.79%. 50 Hendon, city has that at a 4.01%. Our stabilization, based on information that we got directly from the purchasers, would point to a 5.42% cap rate instead. And then just moving through 677 Maryland. So on page 22, the city is using the older sale. There was a more recent sale to occur pretty well right at the reference date. So we believe that that would be more accurate. And we have a cap rate of 7.11%. And then we also have some commentary on McPhillips and St. Mary's. And the rest of the rebuttal, if you wanted to take a closer look at the calculations, that's all available there, but I think I'll just leave the rebuttal presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brokus, questions on rebuttal?
I do not have any questions, thank you.
Mr. Purvis, questions on the rebuttal?
No question, no questions, thank you.
Ms. Warren, questions on the rebuttal?
no questions, thank you.
And I don't have any, I do have a question with respect to the adjustment of the net operating income. As I understand, a simple mathematical test to determine what the capitalization rate should be is the net operating income, the established or the stabilized net operating income divided by the purchase price, which gives a percentage which can be, well, which is referred to the capitalization rate. Is that mathematically a fairly standard approach?
Yeah, mathematically the NOI and sale price, but our position would be that sometimes the NOI that's in place is not necessarily the stabilized NOI in terms of what they were considering at the time of sale.
Okay, and is that based on interviews with the purchaser and the seller, or is that just based on what happens after the fact and the stabilization takes place as a result of what happens after the fact?
So for 150 Hendon, that would be, and so 150 Hendon and our cap rate on Maryland, 677 Maryland, that would be based on conversations with the purchaser in terms of documents they had available to them, information they had from the vendor. And then for the other cap rates where we did a recalculation, that would be based on broker information or other publicly available information. as we didn't have the opportunity to speak with the purchasers. So for example, 459 Sargent, that would just be based on information made available to us. We didn't have the opportunity to interview the purchaser or vendor on that one.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Brokus, you indicated that you had some rebuttal as well. And if memory serves, you indicated that that was going to be verbal.
I mean, I did submit it,
Oh,
but
okay, that was gonna be my next question.
Yeah.
Has that been
Yeah, it
distributed?
has been distributed.
Okay, if you-
A&T rebuttal.
I see it now, right, A&T
Can I
rebuttal.
get a copy?
I think
I don't have
sent-
internet.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, can we take,
Yeah, we need to take a recess for 5
take
minutes.
5 minutes then, please? Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Mr. Brokus, we have your rebuttal evidence. Can you please proceed with it?
yes, thank you. So I'll just fly through this quick because I know you've heard this many, many times. So in regards to the Altus sales, our biggest issue with their cap rate study is that for the sales, they only have 1 year of income and expenses. Well, 3 of them have 1 year. One of them has no years of income and expenses. That would be the one on Maryland. So in order to stabilize, our contention is because expenses fluctuate, you would really need more than 1 year, preferably at least 3, in order to make a determination of what an investor might realistically estimate respective expenses might be on a go-forward basis. 1 year, it could go up, it could go down. So on page 2, you can see basically they only got 1 year, and you can see how the reported effective gross income does not match what they stabilized it at. They use the sales brochure, which is, in my opinion, far less reliable than reported actuals. The reported actuals are on page 3, page 4. It's the same story in terms of only 1 year and a large difference between the reported actuals and what they used in their column for stabilization. Reported actuals on page 5. On page 6, basically what this was is it was the same thing, 1 year, and then effective gross income is far different than what was reported. Also, the taxes and the stabilization is 3,000 using their stabilization. The actual tax bill falls on page 7 is 15,000, which is, that's what the tax ought to be for like a property around $2 million. Or rather, sorry, this one was assessed at 1.2. So like, yeah, $3,000 is more like a house in West Kildonan, not a building over $1 million. So not that I'm saying that the stabilization is right because it's 1 year, but if you did sub in the 15,000, the cap rate would calculate to 4.5. Then if you go to page 11, they don't have any actual data. They just, I guess, came up with a cap rate. Somehow, I'm not sure how they did it. And then less applicable to this hearing is page 12. This is 2390 McPhillips. It's a new build. Again, it's a difference between effective gross income and what they actually reported. When you use the actual income, and when you pretty much use the same expenses, the cap rate comes out to 4.7. That's my rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, questions on the rebuttal?
Just a couple, thank you. So in terms of the statement, I guess on the first page where it says 1 year of income and expense would make it unusable, would it be fair to say that that would be the assessment department's opinion rather than being based on appraisal theory or IWO standards?
Well, I mean, I'm not part of the IAAO, but in my opinion, in order to, the word stabilize does imply more than 1 year of information. So I wouldn't put my foot down. Kind of like the way they say one sale doesn't make a market. I would say that 1 year of income and expense doesn't make a stabilized NOI. So, I mean, that's my opinion and the opinion shared by my colleagues.
Okay, and then most of the expenses would be stabilized based on the most recent year, and the income would be stabilized based on the most recent as well, right?
Well, the expenses, it depends on what the expense is, like repair and maintenance. That's something that fluctuates. Waste and snow is something that fluctuates, so that's an average. Same with office supplies, same with professional fees. And then you have things like insurance where rates go up. So it's the most recent year. Utilities, that's something that is the most recent year as well. So it's kind of more of a half and half split, but income is usually for potential, it's the most recent year. And then we look at the vacancy over time, and so it's kind of a split between most recent and an average.
Okay. That would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warren, any questions?
I'm none, thank you.
Mr. Purvis?
I don't have any questions, no.
And I don't have any questions. Mr. Brokus, any summary?
Yeah, just in regards to this property, like, you know what, in retrospect, I probably should have gone for non-compliance because it's combined income and expenses of two properties next to each other. I missed that in my rush to get things done. So that's my fault, but I mean, not only are the residential and commercial combined, they're combined with another property. So, I mean, you can't really draw an analysis from this mailer because there's just not enough detail. So I feel that the panel should rely on the model valuation. Thank you.
Ms. Kate, summary?
No summary, thank you.
Thank you. Then, having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and move on to item 2 on the docket, which is the street address of 105 Sage Creek Boulevard. Mr. Brokus, can you please introduce the property and provide your evidence? And I should indicate again at the outset, for every property, we've discussed the cap rate, we've heard the rebuttal. If something new is required, then absolutely please bring it up. But if we can apply the evidence that we've heard with respect to the generalizations on cap rates to this one, that would be appreciated. Fair enough?
Yes, absolutely. That was the long one, so we'll move much faster. Okay, file 24-1806, roll number 16093236500, 105 Sage Creek Boulevard. It's another multi-use building in Sage Creek. It's got some commercial at 4,132,000, and it's got apartments at 33,806. 4 buildings, 3 to 4 story, actual year built in the 2020 2021 range. 152 suites, 73 indoor parking, 173 outdoor parking. Unless something's changed, we actually agree on the apartment. So I won't spend too much time on that. Page 2 shows they've been good handing in their mailer information, subject sale history for land in October of 2018. Then we've got our workup on page 3. 103 1 bedroom, 36 2 bedroom, 13 3 bedroom. For the total average monthly rent is 1,484. Then we've got our estimated market value of 33,806 at a 4.8 cap based on model parameters, and we got our commercial at a 4.132 at a 5.35 cap using the model parameters found in the column. Page 4 shows the square footages of the commercial and the rent as assigned by the model. It's all around $27. 247, 214 total for the gross potential. Rent comps are found on page 5. Comparable leases are found on page 6. So you notice I included a picture because all the buildings, all my rent comps are at 55 Sage Creek, and 55 Sage Creek is actually across the street. That's Burning Glass. That's the street that divides the two properties that are on Sage Creek Boulevard, actually to the south of this, just to the south of this photograph. This is all, like, it's just right across the street is what I'm trying to say. And they're in the $30 range. We're at 27. I think we're good. Cap rate comps are on page 7, and chart is 8. You go to the photographs beginning on page 11. And you can, scrolling through, you can see the places, new appointments, but again, unless something has changed, we're not talking about, we won't be talking about the apartment really. So the construction value is, let me see here. $5.8, 6.8, 7.1 for this property in terms of the cost back in 2018, 2019. But we're not doing cost. It's income, and it isn't really in dispute. So it's really just commercial, and I feel that our comps support our value quite well. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, questions?
Yes, thank you. So in terms of your cap rate table on page 9, so this property at 5.35% would be fairly close to the 20th percentile. But given that it's commercial space attached to an apartment complex rather than like a standalone suburban office, do you think that that will be adequately accounting for the risk?
Well, I mean, like, I don't, in this instance, like, if you go to page 6, and this is why I included a photograph, is like, it's literally someone parked their car on Burning Glass. You can see the commercial at 55 Sage Creek on the east sidewalk, or rather the west sidewalk. And then across the street, you see the commercial space in the main floor of the subject property. So I don't see the difference. Like, if it was maybe like up an elevator, kind of not in a neighborhood where they sort of quote unquote have I don't know if captive's the word there, but they've got like a neighborhood where people will go to these spaces for convenience right there. I don't see where the additional risk might come from. So I don't think that would be fair to apply that.
Okay. And then given the nature of this space, so usually when you have like an apartment with commercial on the main floor, it would usually be classified as retail. So this could easily be used as retail, and that would bump it into a higher cap rate category, would it not?
I'm not sure as it pertains to this neighborhood. Admittedly, I don't have the most commercial experience, but it might based on classification.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Warden, questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Purvis?
I just want to take a look at that photo on page 6.
Yep.
So just to clarify, on the left side of the picture, you can see there's a 9 round fitness.
Mhm.
So that building, or is that all, that's all one building, right? They look like they're separate, but it's all just one kind of continuous building.
Yeah, that's actually like a very big property. Like I'm looking at the picture right now. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is a dated photograph as well. It's got like multiple commercial buildings on
Okay,
it.
but that,
So
that side's all commercial.
it's all commercial, yes.
And then across the street, that's the subject property.
That's, yeah, one side of one of the buildings of the subject property where you can see that there's commercial on the main floor.
Okay, and then the upper, there's no non-main floor commercial in the subject property. Like all the, all the.
I don't believe there is. I believe it's all on the main floor.
Someone might have a home office or something, but they're not, nothing that's registered as commercial.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. And so those comparable leases that you got on page 6 at largely at 50 and 55 Sage Creek,
Yeah.
which is one of those buildings is the one on the left with that 9 round,
Oh,
55 Sage Creek, or
yeah, well, that's 55.
on the left. Okay.
50 Sage Creek is actually, if you know Sage Creek, they have that big parking lot where they have like the Shoppers Drug Mart and the Tim Hortons. And I believe there's a grocery store in there. That's just literally on the like south west corner. So if you're someone who's looking for like renting a commercial spot, I would think that like this would actually be a very good location because people are there looking to conduct this activity, purchasing things anyway, and they're driving around, they're like, oh, look, there's something over there while they're kind of there for that reason.
Okay, but yeah, they're all in the immediate vicinity.
Yep. Absolutely. I think it's a great spot.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you, and I don't have any questions at this time. Ms. Keats, your evidence, please.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we are requesting a change in the commercial assessment to $3,076,000. On page 6, we have our property site maps. And then some exterior photos on page 7 and 8. Property description on page 9. So the subject property is on the north side of Sage Creek Boulevard at its intersection with Burning Glass Road in the Sage Creek area. There are 2 4-story buildings and a 3-story building built in 2020 to 2021. 152 units on the residential, and the commercial has a leasable area of 9,050 square feet. So in terms of our income approach on page 14, based on our review of the multifamily, current value appears reasonable at $33,806,000. So we're not disputing that. Page 15, we have our valuation of the OFS income stream. So we've taken a look at the leases at the property, and for the vacant unit, we've gone and applied a rent of $26 a square foot, indicated by the leases in place of the property. We've applied market vacancy at 6%, shortfall allowance at $8 a square foot, non-recoverable allowance at 3%. And on page 16, we have our office cap rates again. So we are disputing the cap rate in place at 5.35%. We note that the current valuation is as an OFS, but realistically, this could also be valued as retail. So there should be some similarity in terms of cap rates that we're using. If one of the tenants in place were to move out, you'd probably have a retail tenant realistically moving in. You're probably not going to have like an office outside of maybe medical use that's would set up in a space like this. So on page 17, we've done a comparison of our office and retail cap rate conclusions. And one thing I would note with the retail cap rates is that top quality is beyond just being new. One thing that Top Quality is referring to for retail is that there's anchor tenants that would be driving people in. So anchor tenants would be things like drugstores or grocery. So what we're doing is we're applying a 6.5% cap rate. That's being mindful of the current OFS, but also the low end of our retail conclusions. I've submitted the office and retail cap rate study document separately for your review, but we just have the overview in the brief. So on page 18, we have our workup. So you can see we have net operating income for the commercial of $199,943 with a 6.5% cap rate, gives an indicated value of $3,076,000. And our appendix starts on page 21, and I've just included the marketing photos that were available for the property as well as the financials that we've looked at. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brokus, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Purvis, questions?
Just want to confirm the only real difference is the issue here then is the cap rate being applied to the commercial.
Yes, that would be the main thing. I think there might be a little bit on rent as well, but yeah, primarily cap rate.
Okay, yeah, and I've heard your evidence on the cap rates, so I don't know. I have no further questions.
Ms. Wareham, questions?
No, mine were answered. Thank you.
And I don't have any questions. Thank you both. Mr. Brokus, any summary?
No, thank you.
Ms. Gates, summary?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Then having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and move on to the next item on the docket. That is the street address at 703 St. Anne's Road. Mr. Brokus, would you please introduce the property and provide us your evidence?
Absolutely, thank you. File number 24-2193. Roll number 08081223685703 St. Anne's Road. Total assessment 8.771. Another mixed-use building, commercial at 748,000. The apartment is at 8,023,000. Built in 2018. It's got 33 suites and 46 outdoor parking spots. Request for income information went out in 2022 and they replied. No recent subject sale history. On page 3, you'll see that there's 3 bedrooms, 21 2 bedrooms and 9 3 bedrooms. Average monthly rent is $1,604. You can see the overall modeled workups. We're pretty close in terms of effective gross income, so I won't belabor the rent conversation. The model cap rate 4.55 and the expense ratio is 40%. Comes out to 243,121 a unit. The retail cap here is 4.45. 5% vacancy for 748,000 on the commercial component. The one retail space is we have $21 signed on the rent. Premise area you can see here on page 4 is just over 2,000 square feet. Rent comparables are found on page 5. We're pretty close on the rent, so to speed things along, I won't touch on that. Comparable leases. I was looking for size and area and effective year built. You can see they range from $18 to $34, which is more of an outlier. We are at 21, so we're pretty well seated within the range of comparable leases there. Of newer commercial spaces, 7, 8, and 9 are as cap rate and Muni Act excerpts. Page 10 shows the construction permit for the property, 4.2 million cost. Then on page 11, I just did an internet search while I was putting my stuff together. Just a description, how the website's describing the property and the fit and finish of it, the exterior. See, it looks like it, I think that's the Seine River it backs onto, which is a nice spot. And you have the interior photographs beginning on page 12. So again, modern night photograph of a balcony overlooking the green space to the rear of the property. So yeah, it's finished like you'd see any other newer apartment or house for the most part. Then we have an ad here for the commercial space on page 15. And where it's located, as it's located on the main floor. Then we have the mailer here on page 18. And again, so the expenses are combined. So just went with the model on this one. Interesting to note that, I mean, they were leasing it at $25 gross. But looking at the pictures, this is before, looks like it was before it was totally fit up. So, I mean, I haven't been there, but I don't think that the current tenant, the massage and beauty bar they probably fit it up since then. So the physical nature is a bit more attractive to rent. So that $25 gross, I don't think, unless I'm wrong, having not been to the Blush Beauty Bar, I think it's probably worth a little bit more to rent now. So just went with the model, and on the commercial base, the rent analysis on the comps. So overall assessment 8.771. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, questions?
Yes, thank you. So your cap rate on the apartment at 4.55%, that would be below the 20th percentile, correct?
See here. Yes.
And then just looking at the commercial with your comments on the rent, on page 19, you have the mailer and it shows that tenant is at $25 gross by the looks of it, because they're not accounting for any type of commercial recoveries. Would you agree with that?
Okay, what services are included in the rent? Well, they didn't check off net lease. And then otherwise indicate placing an X which services are included in the rent paid for by the landlord. So they didn't check those off either. So I wasn't really clear on what the lease included. So I just relied on the comparables.
Okay, that would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Purvis, questions?
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Warren, questions?
Yeah, just, you've got a date of I'm scrolling, excuse me, 2018, and no other effective year built. The pictures were taken when? That you've provided?
These would have been from the website, so I'm not sure when the pictures were taken, but it was sometime after completion. The permit for the construction of the property was back in 2018. So
So nothing else was done from them?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I would assume that the massage and beauty bar did some more fit up. I probably should have included a fit up permit, but I did not. So I don't think it looks like that in there now. But yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Barocas, just for some clarification, the commercial area is the 2,142 square feet,
Yes, that's what we have on file.
and that's all on the main floor?
Yeah, looking at on page 17, it looks like the ad shows it all on the main floor, or the ad shows like a layout of the area that they were looking to lease.
Right.
It
Okay,
appears to be on the main floor.
okay. And with respect to the cap rate being below the 20th percentile, what is it about this building that would put it at this low of a cap rate? What is there that sets this building apart from the 20 to 80 percentile?
Yeah, so I mean, like there's a whole spectrum of properties. And what I mean by that, I mean there's you gotta take into account there's a range of ages going from like the early 1900s up to like today. There's different areas. There's anything from, the north end, Transcona to the south. Some areas are more attractive for investment than others. So in regards to, and amongst many other factors, this one, it's a new building in an area that is attractive to rent. It's, in my opinion, the fact that it's backing on to the Seine River does provide it with a level of privacy, or at least an ability to get away for a bit. No one's looking back at you from their building. So it's a great location and it's newer. So
Okay.
I believe that's why it falls into the lower end of the spectrum.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Ms. Kate Shevins, please.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment, $7,021,000 on the residential and $596,000 on the commercial. On page 6, we have our property maps. Exterior photos on page 7. Property description on page 8. So the subject is on the east side of St. Anne's between Nova Vista Drive and South Glen Boulevard in the Dakota Crossing area. The property contains a 4-story residential building and a 1-story commercial building built around 2020. The subject has 33 units, including 3 1-bedrooms, 21 2-bedrooms, and 9 3-bedrooms. 46 outdoor parking stalls noted, some are covered, and commercial space of 2,142 square feet. On page 13, we have the overview of our income approach for the multifamily. So we are applying potential gross rents of $620,750 or $1,568 per unit per month based on the actual stabilized income reported for the subject. We're applying a market vacancy of 3.6%, and we're applying an expense allowance of $265,961 or 43.1% of effective gross income based on the allocated 2022 expenses. On page 14, we have our cap rate for the subject. We would consider a base cap rate of 5%, and we've made no adjustments. The property is new, so it has some amenities. It's in good condition. On page 16, we have our valuation breakdown. So we are using an effective gross income of $617,032. So what we've done on the expenses is we've done an allocation based on the proportion of the property that the residential takes up compared to the commercial. So the residential would be 95% of the property, give or take. So what we've done is based on expenses that we would expect to be shared across the properties, we've done an allocation of 95%. So that would be inclusive of insurance, utilities, waste and snow. And then we've also gone and calculated the class 20 taxes. The taxes would be the main element that would be different from the residential or commercial, and they're easy to break out. So we have a net operating income of $351,071, and with our base cap rate of 5%, gives an indicated value of $7,021,000. We would consider 5% to be the absolute low end for new properties, 4.55%, well below their 20th percentile. I don't feel there's anything that's particularly unique about this property compared to other newer builds. And if we wanted to reference a cap rate like McPhillips, when we look at what the broker information was saying about that, based on the actual sale price, that would be about a 5% cap rate based on the NOI that was in their brochure with what it actually sold at. So we feel pretty comfortable at the 5% cap rate on the residential side. On page 17, we have our overview of the retail valuation. So the lease in place would be gross. They're not showing any recoveries. So $25 is inclusive. We would estimate at a minimum, typically unrecovered expenses would usually be in the $8 to $10 range, maybe higher. Here we'd consider a lower range, $5 a square foot, and that deduction is further supported by other rent comps that we found in ResAm properties. So we're applying $20 a square foot in our analysis. We have marked allowances for vacancy shortfall and non-recoverables. And then on page 19, we have our retail cap rate. So for retail top quality, our range would be 6.5 to 7%, going to the low end of our range at 6.5%. On page 20, you could see the workup, and that would support a value of $596,000. Our appendix starts on page 23, and I've included the marketing photos available, as well as the financials that we were able to review. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barocas, questions?
Yes, please. On page 16. Looking at your expenses, I just noticed, so they reported 63,000 in taxes. You stabilized it at 79,000 after the rebate. Wouldn't the rebate make the taxes go down, not up?
Yeah, it would make the taxes go down. But sometimes when we've reviewed the INEs, the tax amounts in there aren't always correct. Sometimes they're not referring to a full year. So in this case, because it was a class code 2060, we went to calculate the taxes anyways, based on, this is a calculation based on the 22 assessment with the appropriate post rebate mill rate. So my best guess would just be that the taxes on the INE were underreported, maybe not inclusive of a full year.
Okay, so would the other expenses not be inclusive of a full year either? Following through from that, or can you confirm that they were?
I can't confirm.
Okay.
The other expenses were not able to necessarily vet independently. So I can't confirm.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warhood, questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Purvis?
I don't have any questions.
I have a question just following up what Mr. Barocas said. At page 16, the balance sheet income statement, for want of a better word, that was prepared by your office. That wasn't prepared by the tenant. Or sorry, the owner, the applicant, 703 St. Anne's Road, Thorwin.
So the page on, yeah, so page 16, essentially what we do is we do a data entry from their INEs. So when we're looking at the column under 22, that would be a pure data entry. And then in the subject stabilized, we'll make adjustments where needed.
And are those adjustments based on discussions with the owner of the property, or is that just discussions, or is that just adjustments where needed, where it appears as though there's a spike or there's an anomaly in the income and expense statement?
Yeah, it wouldn't be based on discussion with the owner. It's, I guess, based on our analysis and discretion. Typically, we wouldn't really be adjusting the expenses, but given that it's a res am and some of the expenses will go toward the commercial, it seemed fair to allocate some of those toward the commercial. So we've used a slightly lower amount. And then, I mean, the taxes are what they are when you look at the 2022 assessment. And when we have the mill rate after the rebate in 2022 plus any frontage, those are the taxes. So I feel that amount's fairly objective. And it could be that based on the property being a newer property, there could have been a suck or something in play that what they reported for that year was then a higher amount later. That's what we see with some of the new properties, because then they get supplementary demand for taxes. So I can't confirm that that's what was happening here, but this would be the correct amount.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Brokus, any summary?
I'm okay, thanks.
Ms. Gates, summary?
No, thank you.
Then, having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter, and can we take 5 minutes? Is that okay for everybody? Okay, take 5 minutes, come back at 10:38. Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting back to order and move to number 4 on the docket, please. That's the street address of 93 St. Anne's Road. Mr. Brokus, would you introduce the property, please, and provide your evidence?
Yes, thank you. File 24-3177. Roll number 0808-122-4995, 93 St. Anne's Road. Assessed value 2.126 million. We've got 1,119,000 on the residential, and then we've got 1,000,007 on the commercial. So after I submitted, I did another review of the property, and if you go to page 3, I think the 4.3 cap rate is too low on the commercial, especially when we just looked at a property down the street at 703 St. Anne's that had a 5.45 cap. I think that is a more equitable cap rate, given the region, given the overall age of the construction. So I'm going to make a verbal recommendation on the commercial part, and then I'll give you a total after. So I'm going to use the model NOI of 43,802 on the commercial, and then use a 5.45 cap rate, and that comes out to 804,000 rounded on the commercial. And so then you take the 804 and then you add it to the 119, and that's a total revised assessment of to 1.923 million. So 1,923,000 is my verbal rec, and I'll just pause there.
Ms. Gates, you've had an opportunity to hear, I don't know if you heard about it or knew about it before now, but $1,923,000 is the verbal recommendation. What are your thoughts on that?
Just looking at it now, I think as a overall quantum value based on the other facts of the property, that looks reasonable.
Okay, so you'll accept that recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That having been stated. I think that's probably sufficient. Thank you, Mr. Brokus, for your input there, and Ms. Cates. We'll go through the process just for clarity and for the outside viewers, if there are any. Do you have any questions with respect to that, Ms. Cates, with respect to Mr. Brokus's submission?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Ms. Warehunt, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. Purvis?
None.
And I have no questions. Other than the acceptance, do you have any submission to make, Ms. Cates?
I guess just for the record, can I just state that we're agreeing to the overall quantum value, but not necessarily the individual parameter?
Certainly.
That will conclude my
Okay. Great, thank you. Then I'll assume no questions with respect to that, but any summary required, Mr. Brokus?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
no, thank you.
Then we will conclude this matter and move on to number 5 on the list. That is the street address of 45 Statacona Street. Mr. Brokus, would you please introduce the property and lead us through your evidence?
All right, one moment. Let me just get everything up here so I can be efficient with the presentation. Okay, I am good to go. File 24-3010, roll number 14092771800 45 Statacona Street, Manitoba Housing and Renewal property, so not for profit. Built in 86, 11 stories, 124 suites, 41 outdoor parking. There is exempt institutional that is not under dispute. The apartment we have at 11,749,000. Skipping ahead to page 3 shows 56 1-bedroom, 53 2-bedroom, 15 3-bedroom for the total number of units with an average monthly rent of $982.29, which is not in dispute. Unless something's changed, it's a cap rate discussion on this property. So you can see the parameters for each respective classification on page 3 if you'd like to review them. Page 4 just shows the premise size and then the average rent and number of suites. Page 5 is the rental comps. I did a CMHC market analysis showing that when you scroll down to page 7, to reflect the fact that it is Manitoba Housing, and they're typically, unless they have been heavily renovated, they're typically very utilitarian in nature. It is social housing funded by the government. So we peg it down on an income quality basis to below average to take that into account. And you can see when looking at the CMHC figures on an age, area, and size basis, we're only actually 77% of what the CMHC rent is, taking into account the zone, year built, and unit count. So we're not overstepping on the income. Then the source tables are on page 8, comparable leases are on page 9, cap rate, and UNIAC excerpts flow into the permits, recent permits, which the most recent permits, which begin on page 13. So they did a refresh in 2010, so that would have been 15 years ago. So they do them permit to include replacement of interior finishes, patching, painting, as well as some electrical work. I mean, I wouldn't consider this, like, you can see that we don't have an effective year built on it. It's not like they're putting in like granite and, you know, fancy cupboards. It is social housing, so some are kept up better than others. And then on page 14 shows the renovation to the exempt space, the not-for-profit daycare, including some washroom upgrades, flooring, ceiling, millwork, plumbing, mechanical and electrical. And then we got pictures on page 15. I don't have any interior pictures, so I relied on our aerial program and also Google Street View. So, I mean, we're like 25% lower than the market rents, which might be a bit too low. That seems like a pretty steep discount. But the overall assessment is it's less than 100,000 a unit. And there are 2 and 3 bedroom units in this building. So based on the age, I think a 5.5 cap makes sense. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gates.
Thank you. On page 3, your income value summary for the apartment, is the model accounting for the fact that the property is social housing, or is it treating it like a market apartment on the low end of the rent range?
Well, it's treated like a market apartment because these places, these social housing places without government subsidy often run in a deficit. They would run at a deficit. So the highest and best use is a for-profit market apartment, and that's what we're assessing it as.
Okay. Thank you. That would conclude my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Purvis.
I don't have any questions. I think you answered everything.
Ms. Wareham.
None, thank you.
I just have a question with respect to the 5.55% cap rate, capitalization rate. I'm aware that there is I'll start again. Does the model take into account the nature of the lower rents, the social housing aspect in assigning a cap rate?
No, it doesn't. And I mean, we've had this discussion, at least between applicants before, like the highest and best use of this property, like one of the 4 tenants, other than like physically possible, legally permissible, one of them is maximally like financially profitable. Anyone buying this place isn't gonna buy it and then hope that the government still provides subsidies so it can run on a break-even basis. So if those subsidies aren't there, it's not worth nothing. So anyone buying this would buy it to see how much money they can make out of it. And in order to do that, they wouldn't run it as low-income housing, because as soon as they buy it and they run it on a for-profit basis, those people whose rent who are in there wouldn't be able to afford the rent just via their qualification for low-income housing. So we don't put a cap rate premium on it. We do recognize the fact that they are utilitarian in nature by design, and as such, we peg the rent down to reflect that, and the fact that there may be slightly higher expenses based on the nature that it's being run at. So no, we definitely don't make an adjustment on the cap rate.
So the overall valuation would be reflected as a result of lower net operating income.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's just looking for some clarification on that. Ms. Gates, please, your evidence.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment on the residential of $10,442,000. And the commercial space is an exempt daycare, so we're not disputing that value. On page 6, we have our property site maps. And then some exterior photos starting on page 7. So the property fronts on a couple different streets, so we've included some views from Stadacona, Talbot. And that goes to page 9. And you could see there's a tower, and then there's also some like low-rise row house type units. On page 10, property description. So the subject is on Stadacona between its intersections with William Newton and Talbot Avenue in the Chalmers area. There is an 11-story apartment and then 2-story row house buildings built in the mid-80s. The property has 124 units, 56 1-bedroom, 53 2-bedroom, and 15 3-bedroom. And there are 41 surface parking stalls noted. On page 15, we have the overview of our income approach. So the property is social housing. It operates on a rent geared to income basis, meaning people pay what they can based on a defined proportion of their income. So the rents in place are not at market. So for perspective, it might be people paying $300 a month, for example, for the units. So we know that the city's rents are factoring a proportion of CMHC rents. So we're not disputing those rents at a value of $1,461,648 or $982 per unit per month. And when we're looking at these social housing properties, and we know that they are very basic finishes, typically they're smaller than market apartments as well, because the idea is to house as many people as possible. It does make sense that they should be quite a bit below CMHC averages, because CMHC averages are going to be including renovated newer properties. As well, we don't know the starting and ending values of CMHC, so it does make sense that they would be below the average on the lower end. Vacancy, we're using 2.6% market allowance, and then expenses, $771,046 or 54.2% of EGI as assessed. So we have the overview of our approach to cap rates on social housing starting on page 16 and 17. So the idea is, because these properties aren't typically transacting in the market, and when they do, they may have a lot of atypical conditions associated. The idea being we start with a market cap rate and then we adjust upwards for risk factors. So those risk factors can be put into 4 broad categories, being low cost or low quality construction, age, neighborhood, and low income tenancy. And there is previous board decisions to support the idea that the below market rent isn't enough. You also would need a cap rate adjustment still, because just adjusting the rent, then it's no different from a market apartment that operates on the low end, and it's not factoring in the risk factors specifically associated with social housing. So on page 18, we have a discussion of low income tenancy. So the idea being that there's a relationship between low income tenancy and deferred maintenance. Because these properties operate at a loss, they don't have enough operating revenues to cover their operating expenses. They do rely on funding to remain operational. But what happens is then they don't have enough funding to do those preventative maintenance and repair items that market apartments would be incentivized to perform. So what happens at these properties is that issues will build up over time and they'll tend to escalate in severity. And we do note that across the Manitoba housing portfolio, as of 2017, there was about $500 million in short-term deferred maintenance, and there aren't enough funds being put toward these properties on an annual basis to keep up with this. So it's not uncommon to see Manitoba housing properties with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in deferred maintenance, especially once they're built in the 70s and 80s. So on page 20, we have our cap rate for the subject. We are applying a cap rate of 6.25%, considering adjustments for construction type, low income tenancy, condition as inferred through the exterior photos. I haven't been in the property. And then also for location, Chalmers would be a less desirable neighborhood. So on page 22, we have our breakdown of the valuation. So we have our net operating income of $652,599 with a 6.25% cap rate gives an indicated value of $10,442,000 rounded for a total value with the 40E component of $10,997,000. Our appendix starts on page 25, and I have included just some more background on the social housing cap rates. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Barokas, questions?
Yes, so have you inspected the property?
I haven't inspected the property.
Property is built in 1986. Construction class C masonry bearing walls. Would you consider the age and the construction material to be low cost or low quality?
On the row house, that would be wood frame, but in terms of the high rise, masonry or concrete would be considered a good quality construction material.
And then just if the panel can follow down to page 29, because it's a cap rate discussion, and I know this order has been included, and there's a quote from an appraisal journal in 96, I believe, where the 4 tenants, the journal is saying, so the first characteristics attributed to low investment grade properties, low cost or low quality construction. The second would be advanced age. Would you think 86 is an advanced age?
86 wouldn't be an advanced age.
Okay, and then in your opinion, Elmwood is a declining or blighted neighborhood?
I would say it's a lower socioeconomic area that wouldn't be as desirable. So I would say in terms of comparison with areas in the city, I would consider it to be inferior.
Okay. And then just on your cap rate table on page 20, so you bumped it up 0.75%. Can you maybe give us an idea how that was quantified? Like, how did you quantify the quarter point or the 3/4 point adjustment?
So typically we would consider a 0.25 adjustment across different factors. So our base cap rate would be considering good quality properties in good locations. So in the case of this property, social housing, low income tenancy, we would consider an adjustment there. In terms of location, we'd consider adjustment. And then in terms of construction type and condition, I would kind of blend those together as a different adjustment. When I look at the exterior photos on page 8, specifically page 9, I mean, the condition doesn't look very good, and these would be as recent photos as could get. So that's how I would quantify the adjustments in this case.
Okay. And then just last question on page 11. Is it like a highest and best use breakdown, like the 4 considerations? The 4th consideration is the use must be most profitable for the entire property and generate the highest net return over a reasonable amount of time. Would you agree that the property operating on a for-profit basis would be more profitable than its current use?
Yes, if the property operated on a per or a for-profit basis, then that would be economically more profitable, considering that it operates at a loss right now. So it would be more profitable. But in terms of the highest and best use, given that this property is built to social housing, has only ever operated as social housing without some kind of significant investment from a for-profit purchaser, we can't, like, the idea that all the tenants could just move out and they could just turn it over on a for-profit basis right away. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's a big risk to making that jump in the income.
Yeah, I mean, that part of the deal I would assume would be hammered out before possession. But those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burrow, questions?
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Purvis?
I think I'm okay.
I just have a couple of questions with respect to the adjustments made. And having read the board orders that you have submitted as well, one of the factors in the increased capitalization rate in the board orders is a poor makeup of the type of suites available. That's correct.
Yeah, that would be a factor.
But that's not present here because this has what 30. So I'm just looking at the makeup of the various suites here. This has a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and some 3-bedroom as well, is it not?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a problem with the particular suite mix.
Okay. And the percentage of tenants here who are either on social assistance, sorry again, are all of these suites subsidized?
Yes.
Okay. I'm guessing you don't have the percentage of whether there's social assistance or whether it's all based on net income of reported tenants?
Well, the units would all be RGI, so rent geared to income in terms of the
Right. Okay.
finer specifics, I wouldn't have.
Okay. And your workup has is really just adopting what the modeled rents and expenses are from the city's assessment and taxation department has produced.
Yes, no dispute on the NOI without, essentially the way that Manitoba Housing shows a lot of their financials is they report things in project groups rather than by specific property. So without more detailed data in terms of the expenses, then we would go to the city's NOI. Typically, the rents wouldn't be disputed, given that the actuals are RGI.
Right. The higher expense ratio, though, is something that the previous board orders have taken into account in adjusting the capitalization rate to a higher level. Is that correct?
When we've read the board orders, what I've gotten from them is that they've had lower income in place. And even with a higher expense ratio, a cap premium was still warranted. Granted, it may not have been as high as what the applicant at that time had submitted, but there was still a premium granted on those. And I would say here, in terms of looking at 54% expenses, to me that's in range of what we would see in the market. So when we're looking at market apartments that are pretty well managed, you'd maybe see 45 to 50%. So being in the mid 50% range, I wouldn't consider that to be a particularly high expense ratio.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything else. Mr. Brockes, any summary?
Yeah, I just, for these housing properties, I just feel really strongly like, unless there's something like physically distinct about it, like tiny suites, or it's like purpose built for the low income housing, there shouldn't be a cap rate premium put upon it. Like the fact that they're operating it on a below market basis doesn't have any bearing on what the highest and best use ought to be. That'd be no different than me buying an apartment, 6 units, putting 6 of my friends in there and charging them $300 a month rent, and then turning around and trying to sell it, and then a purchaser saying, oh well, the cap rate should be higher, so it should be worth less because you're only collecting this much rent. So I really feel that in this instance, there's definitely not an adjustment warranted for the cap rate. It's not the greatest neighborhood, but I think based on the age and the suite workup, 5.5 is okay. That's my summation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, in summary.
I would just say that there's a fundamental disagreement on how social housing should be treated, particularly in terms of cap rate. Our submission has support from appraisal institute text as well as prior board orders in terms of treatment of these properties, and that's what we've used today. Thank you.
Thank you. Then having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and move on to item 6 on the docket. That is street address of 320 Austin Street. And I see from the agenda that there are 3 points of revision that are being advanced here, that being with respect to the go back to the agenda so I get the wording right. Certainly, the agenda doesn't appear on my. Anyway, it's the liability taxation and the you can just forward to the liability taxation, the evaluation, and the classification of the property. Those are all 3 at live issues for this application, Ms. Cates?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Then you're aware that the onus with respect to the liability and the classification will rest on you for that.
Mhm.
The evaluation, the amount of the assessed value, that onus will rest with Mr. Brokus and the city. Okay?
Should I again?
No, that's fine. I just want you to know that where the burden of proof lies with respect to that. So Mr. Brokus, if you can introduce the property, please, and give us your evidence.
Okay, I know for class, like the applicant, because it does go first. But I mean, I can go through it.
Okay, well, for classification and liability to taxation, we can have that. I was going to proceed with the valuation first, but I do see why the classification and liability to taxation might have a little more of a grounding. So yes, perhaps if you can proceed first on those 2 issues on which the burden is on you.
Okay, I'll just start by reading the roll number and address.
Sure,
then.
please.
Okay, so property 320 Austin Street North, roll number 14-0229-50000. So I would say the main issue here would be classification is just kind of small value dispute. So to start with the classification, the property functions as a women's crisis shelter, so it's not the typical tenancies in the other managed housing properties. They're specifically functioning as a women's shelter. And I'll just skip ahead. So on page 25, classification of property, we would request a change in the entire property. So the property is currently a 20 and 60. We are of the opinion that the entire property should be 40S. And that request would be under section 23(1)(e), charitable relief for indigent, and I've included the municipal excerpts in the appendix as well as the more information about the organization. So if you follow me to the appendix, page 27. So we have on page 28, the municipal act excerpt. Page 29, we have the charities detail page. So you'll see on page 29, I've highlighted under charity type, it states relief of poverty. So that would be applicable under section 23(1)(e). And then if we keep scrolling, page 32, it talks about ongoing programs. So essentially support for women and children who are victims of family violence. And then on page 34, I've just included some overviews of the programs that are offered here. And I believe that would conclude my presentation on the classification portion.
Okay, then we'll proceed with and what about the liability to taxation?
Yes, the classification and the
Okay.
liability.
Okay, so that was that's been dealt with. Mr. Brokus, questions with respect to the classification and liability?
Yes, has Has the organization ever filled out our request, a review for property tax exemption form and sent it in to our department?
I don't believe so, since we work the property for Manitoba Housing, yeah, I don't believe that the admin route had been taken, but that's always an option too, if needed.
Yeah, yeah, just because like based on what you're like presenting, I'm not gonna dispute what the building is being used for. It's just on our form, there's some like attachments they would need to send in, applicable licenses, lease agreement, with the property owner, etc. Do you have any of that in your brief?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. No, I don't have a lease agreement in the brief.
And so is the entirety of the building used as a crisis center, both the office and the residential?
Yeah, my understanding of the property is that the class code 60 portion, I guess, would be the office portion where they would do the, I guess, planning and admin requirements, and then the residential portion of the units would be actually housing the people who need
Yeah.
shelter.
Okay, yeah. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Purvis, have you any questions?
On this subject, I think the materials provided by the applicant are sufficient to me.
Ms. Warren, questions?
None, thank you.
I have some questions for clarification of the mission statement, for want of a better word, and the filing. The government of Canada, looking at your page 29. The filing from the government of Canada, the business registration number, charitable organization, charity type, relief of poverty. That's what the sole charity type is listed as under the government of Canada. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The quick view and moving down goes through the revenue, goes to that, and it goes to the expenses, compensation. And I'm not trying to denigrate or minimize the work that they're doing with this crisis center, but the crisis center and the residential program don't talk about indigent people at all. It's shelter program for women and children fleeing abusive partner relationships, individual group counseling, etc., protection orders, wisdom tutoring. Where is the indigent portion that will bring it within the, if you could explain the program a little bit, would bring it within the exemptions of section 23
Mhm.
of the Municipal Assessment Act?
So, in terms of relating it, in my view, a lot of it would be implied when we're reading about the programs. This is a crisis shelter within the inner city that's specifically working with primarily like Indigenous communities to provide supports there. So in our view, it would be kind of implied that they're kind of assisting, I guess, lower income individuals. Typically, if someone did have more resources, they probably wouldn't need to go to a shelter. So I can definitely understand the question, but that would be our kind of viewpoint on that issue.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything else with respect to the classification. Just summarize, your position is that the entire property should be Classified as the school tax exempt, class code 40, the school tax exempt,
Yes,
correct? Okay. And the valuation, sorry, the valuation of the property is also at issue?
yes, but just kind of more minor. But
Okay. Mr. Brokus, then would you please proceed with the valuation?
Yes. So, file, am I on here? Okay, file 24-2761, roll number 140229500000320 Austin Street North, Manitoba Housing, owns the property. It's a cap rate dispute for both lines. So, you know, effective year built 2002, 1985, actual year built. So we got the workups on page 3. So we got a 6 cap on the apartment. Even though it's newer, it's not in the most attractive area, so to speak, for a for-profit endeavor. So it's got a higher cap, and then the office is just about 7% on the cap rate for it. On page 5 through 7, that's our rent analysis. Our rent isn't under dispute, so we got this one pegged way down. You can see how we're only on page 7, we're about 78% of the market rent, and that market rent's Lord Selkirk inclusive. So that is encompassing that area in particular. So the average rent, based on just looking at the area, would be $938. We got it knocked down to $654. So we're aware of the challenges that the area has. Comparable leases are found on page 9. Cap rate stuff follows page 10 and 11. And then there's some pictures, page 13 and onwards, just showing some photographs of the center, some of the commercial space. I don't have any pictures of the residential space. And then we have it permit in 2001 for the women's shelter. There's a healing room addition that was built. Interior alterations to the residential facility with some offices on the main floor. $700,000 on the total project value. But I mean, that was 24 years ago. So we got it pegged down in the model to reflect some of the challenges that the area provides. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Purvis?
I don't have any questions.
No, I don't have any questions either. Ms. Cates, with respect to the evaluation, please.
thank you. So on page 2, we would request the residential be revised to 549,000 and the commercial office portion to 462,000 for a total revised of 1,011,000. I'll just skip ahead to the valuation. So on page 13, the overview of our multifamily valuation, we're not in dispute with the NOI for the same reasons as discussed on the prior property. For cap rate on page 18, we're applying a 6.5% cap rate. That would be a 1% adjustment. That would be toward the higher end of the adjustments that we consider, but we do believe that the area and the condition in terms of the exteriors. As far as we tell, would warrant that. So we have our valuation for the multifamily on page 20. So with a net operating income of $35,677 and a 6.5% cap rate, gives an indicated value of $549,000. And then in terms of the converted office portion, we're not disputing the rents of $736 per square foot. There would be a lack of kind of suitable rent comps in the area to use as a comparison. So given that we're not disputing it, we know that this space, if it were market, would rent on the lower end of the range. Market allowances for vacancy shortfall non-recoverable. And then for the cap rate on page 22, we've applied a cap rate of 8% just to better capture the risk of the property. So on page 23, we have our workup, which shows the indicated value of $462,000. And that would conclude my presentation on the value. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barocas, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Purvis, questions?
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Warren, questions?
I have none, thank you.
And I don't have any questions. Summary, Mr. Barocas?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
No,
summary?
thank you.
Thank you. Then we will conclude that matter and move on to number 7 on the list. The street address of number 6 Strauss Drive, and the live issue is with respect to valuation only here. And I believe that's correct.
Yes.
It's great. Then Mr. Barocas, can you please introduce the property and provide your evidence?
Yes, thank you. Okay, file 24-3012, roll number 070811859006 Strauss Drive. It's another Manitoba housing property. So there's 3 classifications. There's class code 20, which would be the high rise portion of the residential. There's class code 10, which would be the townhouse portion of the residential. Buildings with units less than 5 dwelling units. It's all the same liability. And then we have an exempt institutional that is not under dispute. Total assessed value $12,707,000. Built in 77. It's got a 10-year effective year built on it. There's some permits later on in my brief. I'll kind of get into that more. 146 suites, 88 outdoor parking, no indoor parking. It is a cap rate dispute again. So the income value summary is found on page 3. For the apartment, we've got a 5.45 cap rate applied to the net operating incomes. Rent comps on page 5. And then I did a CMHC review on the apartments here. Looks like we're 82%, so we're low on the rent. It is housing, so we're taking that into consideration, the source tables. And then I also pulled some townhouse rent comps as well, based on the overall rent we have. So again, rent's under dispute, but I'm just showing that we've taken that into consideration. So cap rate table, page 11, or sorry, page 10, 11. And then some pictures on page 13. I haven't inspected the property, but by the looks of it, especially that first picture, it looks like the exteriors have been at least been redone on the townhouse portion. Looks like shingles, windows, fascia, soffit. Maybe the stucco has been at least painted. You can see the aerial of the project on the bottom of page 13, how there's a high rise and then the surrounding townhouses. Then with permits, beginning on page 14. So this is in regards to repairs and upgrades. I just talking about on the 2-story townhouse, retrofitting existing building envelope windows, exteriors, doors, roofing, ring gear, soffits, some site work as well. So there's a few of these permits. Because there's a few more than one townhouse building, and you can see the permit values, they're not cheap. So, I mean, that's the thing with these housing properties. No, sorry, and then on page 18, I noticed there is a permit from 2015 for the existing apartment block, new supports, new HRV and condensing unit electrical work. So that's the thing with these housing, like there is money to do them, and when they do them, they do a whole bunch of work, it seems, at once. And then they, based on, I guess, what's going on there, they degrade from there. So that's why we like to inspect them if we have the time and the chance at the meeting board. Unfortunately, we don't have it at the board. So looking at the outside of it, circling back, it looks like the townhouses at least have been refreshed. And I think based on the neighborhood and overall market value per suite of only 84,000, I think the 5.5 cap is more than supported. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Ms. Cates, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Purvis, questions?
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Wareham?
I have none, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Barocas, I'm just looking for the suite makeup here, and I must have skipped over it. My notes say predominantly batch. Here it is. Page 3. Sorry, 96 bachelor suites, 8 1-bedrooms, 14 2-bedrooms, and 16 3-bedrooms, and then 12 4-bedrooms. How are those divided amongst the townhouses and the high rise, or do you have that information?
Yeah, I have that information. I should have been more clear with that. If you go to page 9, the townhouses, they're the 3 and 4 bedroom units. There's 16 3-bedroom and 12 4. So those are the townhouses. The bachelor 1s and 2s, they're in the high rise.
Okay, great, thank you. I didn't do that cross-referencing. I don't have anything else. Thank you. Ms. Cates, your evidence, please.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessments. So on the class code 10 to 385,000, on the class code 20 to 10,848,000, and the exempt portion maintained at 340,000. On page 6, we have our property site maps and then some exterior photos starting on page 7. Property description on page 10. So the subject is on Strauss Drive at its intersection with Moray. There is an 11-story building and then 4 2-story row house buildings built in the late 70s. There are 147 units, 88 parking stalls. You go to page 15, we have the overview of our multifamily valuation. So we're not disputing the NOI, carrying forward same concepts as already discussed. So we have an NOI for the class code 10 of $23,081 and for the class code 20 of $650,883. The discussion on cap rates for social housing starts on page 16. And I'll just go to page 20. We're applying a cap rate for the subject property of 6%. Our base cap rate would be 5.5%. And we're applying a 0.5% adjustment to account for low income tenancy, construction type. I would note that there has been some recent permitted work on the row house buildings. At the time of submission, I didn't see anything on the apartment tower. I do see that in the assessor's brief, he had included a permit on the apartment for some mechanical type of work. And it's not uncommon to see large permits for these types of properties, since they're not able to get work done regularly. Generally, when they do have to do work, it might be, in the thousands, hundreds of thousands permit. To account for the fact that these systems, it's probably the first time they've been replaced. When we're looking at buildings from the 70s, if regular maintenance hadn't been done, it's not uncommon to see that now first replacements are happening in the kind of 2000s. So we have our valuation breakdown on page 22. So we have an NOI of $673,964 with a 6% cap rate, gives an indicated value rounded of $11,233,000. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Brokus?
I do not, thank you.
Ms. Warden, questions?
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Purvis, questions?
I also have no questions.
And I don't have any questions. Mr. Brokus, summary?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates, summary?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Okay, then that will conclude this matter, and that will complete all the matters on the docket today. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you, Ms. Cates. Thank you, Mr. Brokus, for your presentations and your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks.